Hey everybody, I've got rock star Colby Brown, Sony Artisan of Imagery, here with me today to answer your questions. So definitely, if you haven't found it already, on the right side of the frame, click on that chat, the stage chat, and pop your questions for Colby right over there. And we're going to be answering those live right now. So we're waiting for you, right? Colby, so tell me about your experience in Alaska.
Well, Van, first off, it's great to see you, man. It's been a while.
Yeah.
Funny year of travel or lack of travel. But no, Alaska was awesome. Alaska is one of my favorite states to visit here in North America. It is a unique place. It's full of a lot of diversity and mountain ranges and beautiful vistas and wildlife. It was a really fun place. I always enjoy going up there, but it was a great place to explore and to experiment with the Xperia 1 Mark III and to kind of play around with it out in a photographer's paradise, right? Where everywhere you look is like a beautiful picturesque scene. It's an idealistic location and a place that I look forward to going year after year.
Excellent. Yeah. How did the Xperia 1 Mark III really add to the arsenal of photography equipment that you had?
Well, as I talked a bit about it in the video that everyone just watched, for me, it's interesting. I've been doing this for 15 years now. I travel to all 7 different continents. I shoot a wide variety of different things, and so when it comes to adding gear or adding a new piece of gear into my gear setup, into my gear bag, I really had to think carefully about it because I have a kind of a well-oiled machine, right? Like I've been doing this for so long that I want to make sure that the products that I use add value. They make my life easier, right? They allow me to be a bit more creative or have more freedom and flexibility. And with the Xperia 1 Mark III, it was great because there's such close knit integration, as you know, into the Sony Alpha mirrorless lens lineup, right? Like so, I've been shooting Sony for 7, 8 years now. Right now, I'm shooting with a pair of A1s. And not only does the integration work quite beautifully in terms of color science, in terms of just being able to connect so easily into the Sony mirrorless camera system to use either as a remote, to use as an external monitor, which is something that no other phone can do outside of a few options within the Xperia lineup. There are just lots of really great synergistic. I don't want to say necessarily opportunities, but functions and features in there that I think a lot of photographers might not fully either understand or appreciate that they need until they have it. Like that's kind of where I was at. In my mind, before this Alaska trip with the Xperia 1 Mark III, I was like, my phone's my phone, right? It's something that's in our pocket. It's something that I'm going to take some snapshots of, maybe some behind the scene marketing stuff, but it's always kind of at arm's length. I'm limited by the reality of technology with mobile phones. I'm limited with how it's going to interact and engage with my pro cameras, and kind of most of that was just thrown out the door. It was really great to have all that flexibility to, as I mentioned in with the video series piece, which I'm not a videographer. I work on video projects, but I usually bring out film crews. But it was so great to have a phone that allowed me to dial in, to use similar color profiles, to match the color science, to dial in and shoot at the right frames per second. Like how many creatives have been out there and you like see this beautiful scene, you don't have time to bring out all of your gear. You have your mobile phone, for whatever brand it is in the past, and like you film something, but getting that to mix and integrate with your other stuff is like impossible. It never looks right. Like the frames per second is always off. The color grading's always off. It's always different than your pro gear. This was like it was seamless, and that to me is a big deal. That's the type of technology that I want. I want that integration, and I want to make my life easier so that if there is, as I showed in the video, if there's a time where I'm shooting, interview, outside, and I have my phone on me, and I see a beautiful scene happening, like I can whip it out, dial in the settings really quickly, film a quick thing, even do maybe a small panning, and that's going to be quick 10-second B-roll that's going to integrate nicely into everything else that I'm already shooting. So stuff like that to me is just
Nice.
I don't want to use the term game changing, but it definitely opens up, like I said, a lot of those doors.
Yeah, so I see some questions trickling in. Rick is asking, or I'm sorry, Mark is asking. He's never owned a cell phone that wasn't part of his larger ecosystem of laptop, tablet. So I imagine he's talking about a specific manufacturer. What challenges, if any, have you dealt with switching from out of that ecosystem into something that's slightly different, or
Sure.
do you? What do you edit on, and how does it marry up?
Sure, absolutely. Well, can I be specific? Is it like Voldemort where we don't say the name, or
You
can we
can
say the
say.
name? Okay. So yeah, I used to be an Apple user. I used MacBook Pros, and I had or I had a Mac, a mini Mac here in my office. I had iPads, all sorts of stuff. And a number of years ago, I switched out of that for various different reasons. Mostly, I was getting a little bit bored with OS X and what Apple was doing with iOS at the time. Um, the reality is that it is quite easy to break free from, I'd say, about 90 to 95% of what happens in the Apple ecosystem. I mean, there's a few caveats to that. The first is, like, let's say tablets in general. Like, tablets on either the Android or even the PC market aren't phenomenal compared to the iPad. So I know a lot of photographers that will either use like an Xperia phone and still use an iPad to be able to edit quickly on the go if they don't want to bring a full laptop or things like that. And then the other thing outside of the iPad is there's a few services that Apple just, because they want to keep their closed garden intact, like iMessage, FaceTime, things like that, where they'll just never open it up. So assuming you can get around those service related constraints, because there's some great alternatives out there for, say, from iMessage, there's WhatsApp and other things like that. Assuming you can break free from that, just about all the same applications, just about all the same functionality and features, you will be able to have in the Xperia lineup and more. So you have more options with more third-party, players. You have, companies like Sony that are doing great things with their Xperia line that are opening up doors to have this function and features that you will just never have with an iPhone. Being able to use it,
That's
for
great.
example, again as an external monitor, stuff like that is a real big
Mhm.
deal. So these days, I mean, this is a custom built PC I have here behind me in my studio. I have multiple different PC laptops. Usually, I use Dell these days, and then my phone will mix and manage. Historically, has been between Xperia phones, Pixel phones, and now with the Xperia One Mark III, that's kind of integrating now into everything that I'm doing because of that seamless connection that you have with everything. So, long-winded answer to your question, it's not overly difficult as long as you can get through those few small service, the social aspects of things, and as long as people in
Yeah.
your sphere have the ability to use other alternatives that I personally feel are better and more worldwidely accepted, then you're going to be great. It's no problems.
Great answer. Thank you very much. I want to remind everybody over on the left side, or I'm sorry, the right side of your window, drop your questions in the chat for Colby, and we'll try to get to those as soon as we can. I think it's definitely becoming easier to migrate away from, if you have an iPhone, over to something like an Xperia, because a lot of the times, back in the day when they first came out, you were buying pieces of content. You'd buy a song, you'd buy a movie or a TV show, and now it's all subscription based.
Yeah.
So when you migrate over, it's like, your whole library comes with you,
Yeah.
right? Your playlists come with you, and it makes it a lot easier. And actually, we even have, an app on the Xperia device that helps you to migrate stuff that's, maybe stored up in the iCloud or, your Google Cloud, from one device to another, from one manufacturer to another. So really great. It is definitely tough, I think, whenever you think about the investment that you've maybe already made in content, way long time ago, and then you're like, oh, I got to walk away from that, but it's not really the case anymore, right? So really good stuff. Okay, so another question about let's see here. Let me see how to phrase this. So as a longtime user of alpha cameras, would you say the eye autofocus and autofocus in general on the Xperia is comparable? And again, put your questions over here in the chat, and we'll pose them here to Colby and put them on the spot. But eye autofocus and autofocus in general, how do you find it is between using a dedicated alpha camera versus the Xperia One Mark III?
That's a good question. I mean, in the video I said I didn't have one. I sent me another one to play with here.
Ooh.
I know there's only a few of these out right now, right?
Yeah.
What's interesting to me when it comes to the autofocus is that it, it is definitely comparable to what you're seeing on, with the professional cameras, like, right? Like, you're gonna see the dancing dots. You're gonna see it track your subject. You're gonna see the eye lock on as it's going. Obviously, the difference between shooting with a much smaller sensor with cell phone compared to, say, a full frame sensor of the A1, the A9 II, things like that, is that you get a bit more. It's a bit more forgiving in the sense of focal planes, right? So the larger the sensor, the more you're going to have to ultimately deal with depth of field and planes, which is where a lot of mobile phone technology is going to um, computational fixes for creating more depth behind your shots, right? And so with like an A1, you're shooting at a very shallow aperture, and depending on your lens, you might get the eye perfectly in focus, but maybe the nose is not, or maybe the ears are not, especially if you don't have things dialed in just right. Because you're working in such a smaller sensor, and because you have the ability to have that autofocus technology for the first time, if I'm not mistaken, um, in all 4 different lenses that you guys have here. So you have the 105, the 70, the 24, and the 16. You now have real-time tracking in every different one of those lenses, which is phenomenal. And so because it's that small sensor, you're gonna be able to track the eye, get the shot, make sure all of it's in focus. And so it's really great. It takes advantage of the fact that it is still a mobile phone. It's not meant to replace an A1, but it can complement it, and a lot of that technology has trickled down over the years, especially from the A9 series and that kind of stacked backside illuminated sensors that, the sensor readout speed that you're getting and being able to shoot at high frames per second, being able to track those subjects so quickly and so accurately is now trickling down into technology that we're essentially keeping in our pockets or purses or wherever you keep your phone. And so to me, it's really great. So yes, absolutely, it is comparable. It's still a cell phone, but the stuff that you can get out of it with the right hand, with the right understanding of, say, photographing an individual portrait, taking portrait work and using the eye autofocus technology, you're going to get some amazing results in the mobile space.
Excellent. Yeah, so we've got Terrace who's asking, what's your opinion on the distance or landscape photography with the Xperia smartphone? And of course, with the One Mark III, you've got another focal length, the 105 millimeter. How do you feel like it measures up?
Yeah, I think it's great. I mean, again, that flexibility. So this is to me the first time I've really given a shot at a mobile phone that has these multiple different lenses, right? So in the past, the Xperia line has had a couple of different lenses, but this is the first time, and I think it's the world's first to get that variable telephoto lens, where the 70 and the 105 are actually in the same slot here down at the bottom, and it's all optically when you move between the two. But having that flexibility of all 4 lenses, as I hope you guys saw in the video when I demonstrated a couple different times, was incredible. So being able to sit there, I mean, I think a lot of people think of landscape photography, right? And they always just ultimately or start with this ultra wide option. They want to sit there and say, okay, I want to capture all of this scene, like that shot that I shared of the Portage Glacier. And I shot it at 16 so you guys could see what that looks like. But then I also switched to 24, then I switched to 70, and then 105. And having that flexibility to move between all 4 lenses and have them all be optical changes, right? Not digital. Sony's doing some amazing stuff, and the Xperia has some great digital zoom technology, again, using some of that computational photography. But that's for a whole other conversation. But the optical differences between the two, which means you're going to get better quality, you're going to get better sharpness, more texture detail, and having all those together and having all 4 of those options in any scene that I wanted to was pretty phenomenal. And it was the first time that I found myself thinking like I had a professional camera in my hand when I was looking at a scene. It wasn't historically, as I said, this is the first time I've used a variable lens mobile phone. Normally, it's like, okay, I'm standing here. If I want to get a different, I either different perspective or zoom in, I need to use my feet and run up, get closer, or I need to kind of lift the camera up super high, or whatever I'm trying to do. And so, having that flexibility to jump between the 4 lenses in a single scene, I can capture 4 different, completely different feeling or different composed images of the same scene and come away with some great content. So to me, that was probably the most exciting, is that when look at all 4 different variations of that one scene, I can pick and choose whatever one works the best for me. And at the same time, zoom in and look at the details on everything from the 16 and all the details from that wide angle and to the 105, which really makes a difference, especially on a mobile phone, to be able to zoom in. Where again, coming back to that Portage Glacier, 4 image shot that I shared in the video you guys just watched, It's like ultra wide everything, and then 105 was like zoomed in on this beautiful distant peak. Like that's awesome. And to be able to do that with a cell phone and then be able to quickly share that and use it either in marketing material or throwing it up on Instagram is just it's awesome. I was blown away.
That's really great. Yeah, and obviously, you're not always standing. Not all of us are lucky enough to stand in that place, and or come back easily to that place and shoot it at a different angle and that type of thing. And then on top of that, I'm sure you appreciated not having to change lenses and potentially get dust or something on your sensor as well, but having all the focal
Absolutely.
lengths, right?
For sure. Well, I
Yeah,
mean, in
I've been in that
Alaska,
situation.
you know, man, like the
Yeah,
especially in Alaska when we were there, we were fortunate that we didn't get like crazy, rainy days, which does happen. But it was crazy windy a number of those days out there. And I think a few of the clips that I put in this video that you guys again just watched, you can see me kind of shaking around, like I'm trying to
yeah,
hold myself down. And yeah, not having to worry about changing those lenses, still being able to get some
yeah.
great content and maximize the value out of that 12 megapixel camera, I think was great. It was really fun to play with.
That's good. So Travis is wondering, how do you like the dynamic range of the raw files, and what app do you use to process those images? Do you process them on the Xperia?
Yeah, so both great questions. Well, let's go start with so yes, I absolutely was taking advantage of shooting in the RAW, which for the Xperia is the DNG file. And so for me, the vast majority of the editing that I do from anything I take on my cell phone outside of the video stuff, which I'm sure we'll talk about, was done with Lightroom Mobile. It's super simple. It's there on the phone. It can read the DNG files. I can have it all automatically ingest those images into Lightroom Mobile. It then will sync with all my other stuff. So if I do want to process it on my laptop back at the hotel or cabin or wherever I'm staying at, it's very easy and a simple setup. Overall, I found the dynamic range quite forgivable. Again, you are not working with a full frame camera sensor, so I want everyone to make sure that we do understand that there are still limitations built into the fact that the sensor is exponentially smaller than a full frame sensor. However, that being said, I did find myself being able to pull down my highlights, be able to adjust and pull up my shadows, add some texture detail to the midtones and really be happy with the results. You can see a lot of that in the video when you guys watch the video from the 4 different images I shared when I was flying out to Lake Clark. And so I'm looking out the window of this Cessna plane and I'm like, picking the right millimeter length depending on, the patterns of the streams below me or a distant mountain peak. And then some of those, especially the ones that had a lot of snow in it, there's a lot of really bright highlights, right? It was a bluebird sky day, so the sun was reflecting off that snow. And compare that to some of the other shots where, say, again, it was more like the streams and a little bit of nice reflected light and some dark foreground elements. I was able to balance those out and find the right, median between those as I was processing them to give me the results that I wanted to get. So you definitely have a bit of leeway to play with, and I do highly recommend Lightroom Mobile for those of you guys out there. I even send sometimes when I'm out there traveling around and using my pro gear, my Sony A1s or A92s or A7R4s, I will send those files over to my phone to my Xperia wirelessly, especially with the A1s. Being able to send a raw file over is awesome, and then open it up in Lightroom Mobile and then process it that way as well. So regardless if I'm using mobile or even sometimes sending a few individual shots taken with my pro cameras, I'm often experimenting, especially out there on the road with Lightroom Mobile and loving the results.
That's great. So Hubert says, we know that you shoot in a lot of places where no cell coverage is around.
Sure.
So are there any functional dependencies, or is it all localized on I'm guessing on the device itself? Um, are there things that are limiting if you're not in a cellular coverage area?
Not so much. I mean, the benefit of obviously being in a place with cell service is that if you take it right away and assuming you've allowed for it, your data plan has enough data for it, then a lot of that stuff will get backed up right away. So your phone gets damaged somehow, it gets lost. Something like that is can be important to a lot of people out there. But as I said, I spend a lot of my time traveling around the world, almost intentionally to places where there is no connection, and I can't easily upload to Instagram and stuff like that. And overall, there's really no limitations that I personally found. I mean, I'm still being able to geotag the images. Sometimes I do that when I'm traveling with my phone. I'll sit there and make sure that that feature is on. I'll take a shot. It geotags that shot, and then I can kind of come back and remember and create a geotag map, even for some of my images taken with my bigger bodies. And that will still save even if you don't have cell service because it's still attempting to triangulate. So there's lots of little small things like that that I think are quite interesting. But whether it's using the camera, the phone, the Xperia 1 Mark III as an external monitor, whether it's using it to wirelessly transmit from my bigger cameras, whether it's taking images or video on its own, I didn't find myself being limited outside of a the auto backup and b being able to share instantly to social media and stuff like that.
Yeah, I'm sure Colby uses photo pills and some other sky tracking apps, and those don't require internet connection. You do a lot of planning ahead of time, and then once you get to the site, then you're good to go.
Absolutely. And
So fantastic. Well,
a lot of them use AR
yeah,
technology, so you're actually able
yeah,
to, in real time, it's storing all that in a database, so even if you have no connection, you can still kind of see through AR, like, where the sun's gonna be or stuff like that, and the same type of stuff filters into a lot of other stuff with Xperia, so you're good to go.
nice. And yeah, we might note that it's also an unlocked phone as we're selling it now. So if you do travel abroad and you just pick up a SIM, you can drop it in that toolless, door and get data wherever you're traveling, right?
Absolutely.
So we talked a little bit about the autofocus tracking. Joey has a question about the FPS in what is the FPS shooting stills in burst mode?
Yeah, so it maxes out at 20 frames per second, and so it's really great. Like, you don't wanna have that feature on when you're taking a static shot, right? Because 'Cause you're gonna have 20 images of the exact same mountain, or a portrait if someone is, not moving rapidly. But when you're getting some of that movement in the flow, that can really make a big difference between that one shot with, your subject's eyes open just right, or that perfect smile, things like that. So I've experimented with some of that with my cats and dogs here at home, playing with my son, bouncing on the trampoline in our backyard. And really, again, blown away by the results. Like 20 frames per second, like that doesn't happen. You don't have that in other mobile phones. And so being able to match that with the autofocus system, I think that's the key, right? Like taking tons of images or tons of frames per second doesn't really help if those images are out of focus, right? Or if you're not nailing the shots that you want. And so I found the phone to be incredibly responsive, which is important because sometimes in the past with mobile phones, especially, like you're waiting for that shot and you try to take the shot and it's a delay and it's trying to achieve autofocus and it finally takes the shot and like your kid's already bounced off the trampoline, like you've lost the image, right? And so I don't find any of that. I would hold the button down. You have a dedicated camera button. You guys can see kind of down there. You probably can't see, but there's a dedicated camera button where you can essentially just use it as you're holding naturally, where a shutter button would go, and holding that down halfway works just like a regular camera. And so you're achieving autofocus. You have high frames per second on. You hold it down, and it's just instantly taking the shots for you. And I think a lot of that really is um, uh, the benefit of not only the CPU that you found inside this device, which I don't know the exact model that it is, maybe you do. But certainly the stacked backside illuminated sensor, same technology in the A9 series, same technology in the A1. That just gives you such a fast readout speeds and being able to achieve a lot of this autofocus technology, being able to check 60 times per second to make sure that your image is actually in focus while allowing for real-time tracking. All that stuff mixed together is all thankful to the A1 technology, or not the A1, the alpha technology filtering into this mobile device.
That's great. Have you printed any images? How do you feel like the 12 megapixel resolution holds up?
I actually haven't printed any from Alaska just yet. Now that being said, I have, beautiful 32-inch 4K displays that you guys see back here. And I've looked at all of the images that I've taken throughout Alaska and I've been blown away. Now, if it's going to look at 100% here good, I have a really good feeling that it's going to print really well. Now, 12 megapixels, depending on how you're going to upscale, I wouldn't necessarily push them as far as I would, again, with a full frame or an APS-C sensor because again, there's a little bit of limiting technology within those smaller sensors. But I'd say for normal size prints, maybe up to like a 16 by 24. If you get a really crisp image, I think you could still come away with some pretty beautiful stuff, especially if you know what you're doing when it comes to upscaling. Because that's kind of an art in and of itself. And whether you take it with a mobile phone, whether you take it with a professional camera, and you crop in a lot and you have to really, you want to blow that image up, it requires a bit of finesse and a bit of understanding. There's some great tutorials out there to help you guys follow along with some of that. But just out of the box, just with straight, beautiful tack sharp image that you got, you do have some flexibility to print some of those images and be really happy with the results. Yeah, so I'd say somewhere around that range of a max of like 16 by 24 ish, that range. But anything even a little bit smaller, you're going to get even better and better results because that's typically how it works with downsizing.
Nice. Yeah, so I want to also remind everybody, if you have any questions for Colby, please put them in the chat window, and then we'll try to get to those as they come in. One more question from Kevin. He's a beginner, and he's asking, what would you recommend for learning the various settings and functionality of a device like the Xperia? Like, what kind of subjects, people, places, things would you recommend starting with?
That's a tough question. It depends on where, I guess, where your interests are. I usually recommend that regardless if you're, again, mobile phone, professional camera, like I think starting wherever you're passionate about, because that will help you get through the challenges that you're going to face with understanding exposure better, with composition, with subject selection and placement. Like the core concepts of photography are no different regardless of which device you're using to capture it. There's some great books out there, which I think we can can I give a book recommendation right now for general photography? Is that all right?
Sure.
Uh, so there's a great book out there for those just getting into photography, called Understanding Exposure by Brian Peterson, that you guys can find on Amazon or other places, wherever you want. That really gives you some great core concepts of understanding what's going on. And then between that and, doing some searches, seeing what Xperia itself, Xperia US, is pushing out in terms of tutorials, things like that are going to be great resources for you guys to understand some of the nuances or some of the hidden features that I think are great. But at the end of the day, getting a book and understanding the core concepts or watching a YouTube videos only gets you so far. Like, get out there, get the phone, experiment with the different features because there are a lot. It has a lot of that technology from these professional cameras. And then learn from your mistakes as you go, and you'll study the images that you get, figure out which ones are keepers and which ones are not, but don't just disregard the ones that are not. Like, try to look through those images and see why they didn't work for you. Maybe it was composition, maybe it was subject selection, maybe you didn't get the exposure right, or maybe the camera didn't get the exposure right. You were in one of the basic auto modes, or you're in the basic mode in the Xperia camera app, and you realize that the camera wasn't giving you what you wanted, and so you might then want to experiment with shutter speed priority mode or shooting in manual, which is what I do. I shoot in manual on the cell phone, which is awesome. It's great to be in Alaska, or again here in Eastern Pennsylvania, go into the backyard, dial in my settings exactly how I want, pick my shutter speed that I want, adjust my ISO depending on the scene, and really be able to capture the right spectrums of light that I want to go after. But experimentation is always going to be the best way to learn, with a little bit of background knowledge and maybe some help with tutorials along the way, which again, Xperia, I think, is pushing out some great stuff too on their YouTube channel and other places.
I love that. I love that you mentioned, finding something that you're passionate about, something that you love photographing, and then going out and don't be afraid to fail, right? Because
Absolutely.
yeah, if you fail taking a picture of kittens because you love kittens, you know it's okay. You'll stick with it a little bit longer, right? So
Absolutely.
yeah, that's great. And I'll remind people, I work with a lot of organizations out there, nonprofit, for profit. There's schools that are starting to integrate smartphone photography into some of their curriculum as well, because it's just another tool that you can use in your arsenal. And it's a nice, lightweight, powerful tool that you can do all sorts of stuff with. But it is another camera that you can use, which is really great.
Absolutely.
So
Well, and
yeah,
really,
check out some of
really,
your local schools.
I
Mhm.
didn't want to interrupt you right there, but just really quickly to add on to what you were just saying right there, which I think is phenomenal. And absolutely check out those local schools and opportunities with local, NGOs or charities or organizations. But just a quick, not I want to say caveat, but a quick addition. For photographers, it's really easy to go to events like this here at the Alpha and see all photographers like myself that have been doing this for, again, I've been doing this for 15 years. And to think that, I can't achieve that. I can't attain to what a lot of the people you guys might be seeing on events like this or just in general on social media. All of us started somewhere. All of us have taken lots of really bad images over the years. And a lot of it came down to pushing through and learning and challenging ourselves and learning from those lessons. So regardless of where you guys are at right now in your creative journey, just realize that all of us have been there before. A lot of us still take bad images on occasion. Just we do less of it as we've been doing this more professionally. But we all have a pathway and we all have a journey. And I think that as long as you guys can push through it, which is why both myself and both of us recommend that you guys try something that you're passionate about. It will just help you work through those challenging moments so that you can get to a place where you're taking images that you're very proud of and you can share them with people that you love and other people online. And yeah, it's a beautiful thing. So just wanted to add that in there.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And one more question from Gloria. She's I guess she's wondering about how to mount your phone to your Sony camera. Do you mount the Xperia to the camera, to
I
the office?
do. Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
So, I actually have something in my closet, but I'm not gonna go grab it right now. But essentially, so when I'm using my the Xperia 1 Mark III, or when I was using it in Alaska, and say I wanted to use it as an external monitor, or I wanted to use it to connect to the Xperia device, to use that as a remote, like depending on the situation, there's different types of pathways you can to have it connect. When I'm using it as an external monitor, I do want it on my hot shoe mount, and you can buy just standard hot shoe mounts that are almost like a small mini ball head that just slide onto that hot shoe mount. And then from there, you can there's a number of places you guys can find online, Amazon, B&H, other places that will sell a cell phone connector. It's like a springy device that allows you to connect to your phone horizontally. So it kind of clamps on as you spring it out, and then you put your phone in there and it cinches back down. And then you have the ability to have your phone on there just like an external monitor, just like anything else. And I think combined together, it's like, I don't know, you probably spend like anywhere between 10 to 30 bucks, depending on the quality or what you would decide to go with that. And then you also need the cable, of course, the right cable to connect from your Xperia device to your Sony camera, depending on if you want to use it specifically for an external monitor or not. But yeah, it's very simple to do. It's just two pieces. I usually carry them in a separate bag in my gear bag and just kind of store it in a pocket. And then when I'm out there in the field and I need that, larger display, for example, I'll bring it out. I'll put the hot shoe on. I'll put the connector onto the phone. I'll twist it on so it secures on there, and then plug in the cable, and I'm good to go.
Yeah, and on the note of cables, I will offer this advice: don't go cheap on your cables.
Agreed.
I don't know how many
100%.
times I've plugged in a cable and it's just DOA or something, and it's because it's a cheap cable, and then you end up tossing it, and it makes your life a little more difficult. And then
Test
also
it before you get in the field.
exactly, yes, test it ahead of time, and then treat them with tender loving care as well. So
100%
but yeah,
agree.
so definitely, if we have any other questions, please feel free to drop them in the chat. We're about to wrap it up here in a little bit, but if you have any last questions, Colby, where are you traveling to next? What's next on the itinerary?
That's a good question. Right now, I am planning on heading to Finland at the end of September to hopefully go photograph the very tail end of the brown bear season out there and bear cubs.
Ooh.
And then from there, I head from Finland to Italy, where I'm teaching a landscape photography workshop out there in Italy in kind of mid-October. So those are my two next adventures coming up at the end of September and into October. I had a pretty hectic kind of start to being able to travel again as things started to slowly open up back in May. And it's been kind of full tilt until now. So I'm spending 2 months at home and then getting back out there in the field and having a few of these adventures.
Excellent. So will you be taking the Xperia 1 Mark III with you on your
A-
travels?
Absolutely. Now, this particular one I do have to give back, but I did order my own. So I am replacing
Mhm.
my own daily driver right now. As soon as they become available to start shipping everywhere, which I don't think is too long for
Yep.
going out everywhere here in the US, then that's going to be what I'm going to take with me on all my trips moving forward.
Yeah, I'd like to remind everybody that the Xperia 1 Mark III is going to be shipping starting the end of August, early September here. We're getting really close to it. We do have some show specials, some promotions going on. So if you pre-order or order it once it comes out in the month of September, we are running a promotion with the Sony 1000X Mark III noise canceling earbud headphones, the
Which
wireless
are
Bluetooth
awesome.
headphones,
I have them.
which
They're
are
awesome.
amazing. Yeah. And then if you're a Call of Duty fan, we are also the official partner of Call of Duty Mobile. And so you're going to get 43,000 Call of Duty Mobile points. What kind of games do you play while you're in transit or out on the road?
That's a good question. I stick to some of the core basics, which I mean, a lot of phones can do, but I would say we didn't get a chance to talk too much about the display on on the Xperia 1 Mark III. It is the best display I've had on any mobile device ever. But I've been playing. I usually try to connect back with my son at home, so when I have internet connection and I'm not too
Oh,
remote, we play Among Us. We'll play some Fortnite. Stuff like that. I haven't gotten too much into Call of Duty Mobile, but lots of games kind of around each of those two features. Anything I can play with my son when I'm traveling. One time I was up in the Canadian subarctic and I was photographing polar bears, and we had this kind of outpost and we had connection. Right, it was the strangest thing.
oh,
And so I'm
cool.
like out there in the middle of a place where it's like negative 55 degrees, but we were warm inside. And we had internet connection. I was able to connect with my son, and I played Fortnite. And he was back here at home, and it was just fun little moments like that are always great.
Yeah, I think that's the untelevised side of travels is sometimes the weather just does not cooperate.
Nope.
And the nice thing is with the Xperia 1 Mark III, obviously you've got something else that you can do and occupy your time.
Absolutely. You can play little games. You can watch some, watch any Netflix or things that you've downloaded. Like it was, yeah, like I said, we didn't get a chance to talk about it, but that 4K OLED 120 hertz screen like is huge. And the 120 hertz, just really quickly, what's interesting about that for
Yeah.
those that aren't too much of a tech nerds out there, which I 100% get. So a lot of people think of refresh rates in terms of like gaming because, fast moving subjects look better. And that's true. There's reality to that, but having a display like this that is so beautifully visually in terms of the 4K OLED, but then having the 120 hertz when you're just using it, when you're just scrolling down a web page, when you're just using through the system UI, it is so much more fluid than probably any device you have ever used before. And I think that makes to me also a big difference. It's small nuances like that with that technology where it might be geared or marketed for, say, like gaming or things like that. In reality, you get to take advantage of every time you use the phone. So whenever I was using the phone to, check my website or to, shop online or to watch something on Netflix when I'm traveling, you're getting those benefits as well. And so that was really fun with this phone. And that's, you're right. There are a lot of times when you have downtime or weather doesn't work or cars break down or things happen. And so having a device that you can, maximize that potential and, give yourself a little bit of a brain break and, just sit down, and watch something and have it to be so beautiful and visually stimulating, I think is phenomenal as well.
Wow. Fantastic. Well, I want to thank you so much, Colby, for your time, for your insights, and for your travels as well. So we get to look through your lens as we follow your content and where you travel next. Thank you, everybody, so much for joining us for this session. Colby, are you doing another session later on?
Yeah,
Or where are you going to be?
I have another session. So I have another session coming up where I'm screening one of a new video series I had that I created, wildlife and portrait photographers intermingling together, which is quite interesting. We filmed that in Alaska as
Ooh,
well. Coming up in an hour or two at 2:30 Eastern time. So I'm not sure what time that is specific. And then I'm actually doing another one of these later on as well, another one of these classes. But yeah, I'll be around
fantastic.
for sure. So if you
You're
guys have any
busy.
questions
Yeah.
about the phones or anything like that we didn't get a chance to answer, feel free to reach me on Instagram or something. Tell me you watched the event, and I'll happily answer your questions about my new favorite cell phone.
Fantastic. Thank you again so much for all that you've done. And you guys stick around. We'll see what's coming up on the next segment here. Or if you want to bounce over to the Xperia booth or over to the Pro Support booth, we've got sessions going on over there as well. We're usually answering Xperia questions. But if you want to follow Colby around, I'm sure he'll be happy.
I would not be
All right. Thank you guys
unhappy
so
about
much.
that. Cheers.
Thanks, Colby. Take care.